All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talkin' Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Thanks for being patient, everybody. I know I'm late. I know I'm very late, but frankly, not only was it a busy day, it's been a busy night. I've been working the phones, and so I did have a good reason. Of course, we know, let's just get right into it. The big news of the day: Wink Martindale resigning as the Giants defensive coordinator, going to pursue head coaching and defensive coordinator opportunities. First to report that on X for the New York Daily News right here. Told you guys that Black Monday was going to be explosive here in East Rutherford, and indeed it was. We had four coaches fired. We, of course, had Bobby Johnson, Thomas McGahee, Drew Wilkins, Kevin Wilkins, and then on top of those four firings, Wink Martindale resigning as the defensive coordinator. So, of course, a lot of upheaval. Doesn't say a lot of good things about what the Giants are running right now and the operation they have going. But we will get right into your questions. Going to tell you about Bet Online first, and I'll get right into it. Thanks for being patient. I really do appreciate it. With the NFL playoffs right around the corner and the NBA season in full swing, BetOnline has you covered with all the up-to-the-second odds, news, and scores. With additional odds, lines, trends, and info on both desktop and mobile, you can access the world's best wagering information anytime. Head there today to get in on the action and see all the updated odds. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Hunter, let's start with you. He says, why is Kafka still here? He doesn't deserve to be the OC of a high school team, let alone an NFL team. That's a good question, Hunter. I think that based on how the offense has performed, of course, if you looked at based on merit, who would deserve to stay and go, you would say that if only one coordinator was still on staff, you would think it would be Martindale on defense, right? And not Kafka on offense. Could be related to the fact that if the Giants had lost either through firing or resignation, all three coordinators, I mean, it already looks bad right now with Martindale leaving and Thomas McGahee fired. So 2 out of 3 looks terrible and doesn't reflect poorly. What does 3 send? What kind of message does that send to Giants ownership about how much faith the people underneath the leadership have in the guys running the show? I think if Kafka does end up sticking around as offensive coordinator, what does it look like, right? It could look like Mike Kafka continuing to call the plays under Brian Daboll. It could look like Brian Daboll taking play calling away from Mike Kafka with more pressure on him going into year 3 after a disappointing second season and a year where Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll really, as they sat at the podium during the press conference, kind of had to take it on the chin. Joe Schoen really did take ownership of the fact that he didn't do a good enough job, that he has to do better, and that their record is what it says they are at 6-11. So he had to own it. Giants Chronicle says, I seriously don't understand Brian Daboll. Pat, let me rant. First off, he lies to us constantly in pressers. He does fans dirty. He makes Wink look like crap and says, I expect him to be back. Wink looks like the bad guy when really he's the one who ruined the relationship by poking his nose into the defense where he doesn't belong. He's basically starting over, so fire Kafka while you're at it. Seemed like he put Wink in position where Wink couldn't do anything else but resign. Terrible management by Daboll that people will see around the NFL and say, why would I want to work for that if that's how he treats coaches? Man, Giants Chronicles is on a heater. Absolutely unbelievable, and there were better ways to handle it. For one, they could have talked it out like grown men. Yeah, Pat, I am happy. I'm not happy. I'm pissed off. We have gone from making a playoff run to firing everyone within 2 years, and I can't believe Kafka is still here. Seems like he will be fired tomorrow, though. No guarantee that's going to happen to Mike Kafka. As of right now, Mike Kafka is still with the Giants. Chronicles, that was a great rant, and I think an observant rant from a passionate fan who I think is watching closely, participating in our live chats, reading about the Giants, watching the team, and paying attention, I think one of the poignant things you said there was observing how Martindale was made to look like the bad guy as Daboll handles press conferences a certain way. And I think that really stuck out on Black Monday morning when Brian Daboll, when he said, I expect Martindale and Mike Kafka to be back, he also threw in a line. He said, yeah, Wink always talks about this being a destination, so that's good. And it seemed like a transparent effort to put the onus and the pressure and the public kind of eye on Martindale. Like, so in other words, if he were to leave or not come back in 2024, it was like a public relations spin effort to put the blame on the defensive coordinator, even though it was also a passive aggressive effort to essentially accelerate the departure of that same person in Wink Martindale, right? So it's almost like picking a fight, through the public while talking to the media, which is really representing the fans. And all in all, it leads to a fracture, a split, a separation, and not good for the Giants, because we all know that if there was one positive about this situation and about this season, it was Martindale's defense, which tied for the league lead in takeaways with 31. The Giants were tied for the best turnover differential in the NFL at plus 12 with the Ravens as well. Jay Mazzella says, I've seen Kafka scheme receivers open, plus Tyrod threw for 300 the last 2 games. He looks like he has talent, so keep him. I hope he stays. Yeah, Kafka's a bright young mind. He is a young coach, but he's a bright young mind. And keep in mind, he's an offensive coordinator running Brian Daboll's offense. This is not Mike Kafka's offense. This is a Brian Daboll offense that Mike Kafka is running. Born for Sports says, how big a percentage the Giants will trade up for a quarterback? We talked to Joe Shane about that today. He said, I really don't know whether he's going to draft a quarterback or not. He can't say right now. He left the door open to doing so. He mentioned the idea of maybe using capital to trade up or to draft where he sits. He also said that as of right now, they're building around Daniel Jones still, but they also have to plan for the fact that he might not be ready week 1. Now, hearing him talk like that, and given the pressure they're under now, given what's happening, given what's to come, given the dysfunction that clearly has been revealed by everything that's going on here, just in the last 24 hours, let alone the last few months, I think, there is a chance that they try and sign or bring back a stopgap until Daniel is ready, because they know they have to build up the rest of the roster with their draft capital to try to be competitive enough, frankly, just to keep their jobs, right? So that kind of pressure, I think, could be on them as much as anything. So that could deter them from drafting a QB. At the same time, you're Joe Shane, you're a first-time GM. You took a job where you thought you were going to draft a young, promising quarterback that you could develop with Brian Daboll, who worked with Josh Allen. You're trying to prove again that you can do that with a second quarterback if you're Brian Daboll, and have the same kind of offensive success. So there's also the temptation and also the potential to kind of buy yourself some time by hitting on a young quarterback like that. And then by showing ownership that, your plan is on a better track than it was prior to that selection. As for Wink, Jay Mazzella says, he works for the head coach and shouldn't be demanding anything. In the end, it appears to me he had his defensive coaches try to turn up the heat on Daboll by having them leak. Yet Mazzella, that's a conspiracy theory that is off base. Chronicles says, Pat, tell us everything your sources told you about the Wink resignation. We all know what really happened. Daboll pushed him against the wall and had no other option but to leave. And Danny R says, hey, Pat, this whole Wink situation is really going to put a black eye on Brian Daboll's coaching reputation. This will follow him everywhere he goes. Not a good look. Right. So everything I know is that, what happened today was not the reason that it came to Wink Martindale resigning, but what happened today, accelerated that situation and helped it as well, helped it down the road towards a separation there. So, essentially to put the onus on Martindale at that press conference like that, if you're Brian Daboll, before you even talk to Martindale or Kafka, announcing that you expect them back, but they're not definitely going to be back. And then the firing of the Wilkins brothers, Drew and Kevin Wilkins. Drew Wilkins is a respected coach, did really good work with the outside linebackers. Kayvon Thibodeau had, 11 and a half sacks this year. So, your number 5 overall pick from last year. I think the organization has done a lot of defending of Thibodeau coming off last year when the sack number wasn't as high, but the Giants were saying how encouraged they were with kind of his overall playing the run, et cetera. This year, the sack numbers were better. His well-roundedness of his game wasn't necessarily there, but also I think defensively, Martindale tied at the hip really to his right-hand man there in Drew Wilkins. They were responsible for the game plans and the schemes and the blitzes and the pressures and the executions that helped the Giants force so many turnovers. Of course, some Giants fans don't want to hear this, but that 3-game winning streak that's going to make Tommy DeVito probably a good amount of money for a long time. Obviously, what paced that winning streak was the defense forcing 11 turnovers and the team, I think, forcing 12 as a whole and maybe 14 in a 4-game stretch there. That was born out of the defense, dominating the Washington Commanders, the New England Patriots, the Green Bay Packers, when then DeVito chipped in some rushing yards and a nice late drive, had the 3 TD passes against Washington, but mostly the defense kind of carrying the Giants and bouncing back after a stretch where they were really kind of beaten down and broken from having to play so many games without any help from an offense. I think a lot of it wore on just on the football side of the whole thing, like the fact that the Giants defense was playing at a certain level and that, listen, when you're trying to rush the passer, but you're down 14 and 21 points a lot and the team's running the ball and is able to kind of bleed the clock and then establish that and play action off of that, whatever it is, let me put it this way. Going back to the Wilkins brothers and what happened today, there was nothing that Drew Wilkins did as a coach that warranted firing based on the defense's performance and based on the fact that obviously the Giants' weakness was their offense, their inability to score points, a poor offensive line, injuries, special teams weaknesses, and then certainly the Giants' run defense wasn't good enough. But even Martindale made an interesting comment about that in his last press conference. He said, if you go back to Baltimore and look, we were always tops in the league in run defense. We're not here. And that was also a personnel priority of Joe Shane in the offseason. Of course, Bobby Okereke was a good addition, but the Giants still not a team that stopped the run. They weren't stopping the run even in that last game against the Eagles when the defense forced 4 turnovers and the Eagles kind of played into their hand by throwing the ball. But I'm getting off track. Chronicles going in a lot of different directions, a lot of information bouncing around my head. A lot has happened today. But Kevin Wilkins, defensive assistant, he and Drew are highly regarded as kind of young and up and coming coaches. And firing them and the fact that the Giants fired them, I think the best way to view that is either the best way I could view it is either it was a way to try to get to Martindale or at least a way to continue to try to accelerate his departure, whether they wanted him to step away so they could save money on the final year of his contract. He has 1 year left on his contract. I definitely think the Giants would like this to look like that, there was something personal here where it was Martindale leaving and the Giants wanted him to stay, but Martindale left and scoring the Giants. And I think it was very clear from the actions of the Giants and the words of Brian Daboll and the Giants today. I think it was very clear that, the separation was desired on both sides is the way it looked like from the actions and the verbiage coming out of 1925 Giants drive. But essentially led to a situation on Monday afternoon where, listen, this situation has been untenable and you know, something that wasn't going to work for a while. And when Jay Glazer reported that and it became public, that was, first of all, not at the start of, things going south. And that was also, um, how do I put it? Just the tip of the iceberg that was reported. And, what's interesting is that that report came out, went public. I know John Middlecoff on the Volume had a podcast where he unloaded some dirt, what he was hearing in the building. I know I did some reporting and kind of reading, kind of sprinkling in the tea leaves. We've talked a lot on these lives and on this podcast about the situation. Dan Duggan at The Athletic wrote something in November that touched on how unsustainable the Daboll Martindale kind of collaboration appeared to be. So this should not shock you. And that was one thing I wanted to get across to everybody, whether you're returning to our podcast here or you're new, is if you're returning, or people who are loyal followers here will tell you, I have been shouting from the rooftops for the better part of 2 months that it was going to be a bloodbath at the end of this year from the Giants, for the Giants staff, and turning over into the offseason, and that it would not reflect well on Daboll, Shane, or the organization. And so here we are. I'm a man of my word. You don't want people to lose their jobs. You don't want teams to lose. You don't want players to lose good coaches, which is what the defensive players are losing here. Because listen, whatever you think of anyone here as people, it's irrelevant. What's the goal here is to win. And the goal is to play strong football, for all sides of the ball to complement each other, for the best ideas to rise to the top, for the Giants to win games, get to the playoffs, and win Super Bowls. That's what everybody wants. And not everything that was going on with the Giants this year and everything that's been happening under this regime has not pointed all things in the direction that the Giants need them to go as an organization. And so people have butted heads. Daboll and Martindale butted heads in particular over that fact, over the fact that, when the Giants go out on game day, there are things that are happening. There are things that are discussed. There are mistakes made that are compromising everybody's ability to win, that could be avoided if there was better communication, if there was more intelligent process behind what was being done. And I think what you're seeing here is a revered, respected coach in Martindale resigning to, whether it's as a head coach or a defensive coordinator, go somewhere where good football is played, is understood, and is respected. All right, let's see. I would say Chronicles to round that out and then to try to get down through the queue. And again, thank you guys for being patient. To round that out, I would say, we have to hear from John Mara and Steve Tisch. We have to hear from Giants ownership because, ever since the Glazer report hit, they essentially had like more than a month's notice to get their arms around this. And what happened, right? Other than some PR spin attempts, nothing meaningful to prevent what happened today, which was a clear attempt to create this change, in my opinion, from my viewpoint. All right. Danny R says, Brian Daboll just put some major pressure on himself with the whole Wink situation. Daboll better lead us to the NFC East Championship game, or the NFC Championship game next season, or else he deserves to be fired. I do think there's job pressure on both Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, possibly in this season. Definitely Brian Daboll. And since Joe Schoen runs the show, and it really is his show, I would say him as well. Chronicle says he definitely has to meet the playoffs at least. NFC is wide open other than the Niners. Take advantage of that. Needs to have a good free agent class. Molly Mall says the picture on Wink's play sheet with Jack Bauer finally makes sense, right? Did it mean that they were going to all out blitz Jalen Hurts, or did it mean that Wink was going to shoot his way out of East Rutherford, right? You could take it however you wanted to on Sunday, but maybe Monday brought some clarity to it. Molly Mall, interesting point. Mazzella said he had 24 hours. Yes, exactly. That's right. Hunter Keller says, as long as Kafka and Daboll are the two offensive minds, we aren't going anywhere. And that's part of the problem, right, Hunter? Daboll came here from Buffalo with the offensive acumen and the accomplishments of the Bills' offense with Josh Allen. But now you come to New York, you use some smoke and mirrors and running game and Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones's legs to get the job done just enough. And then a couple strong games with Indianapolis and Minnesota at the end of a season. Daniel Jones gets paid. And listen, he earned that money with what he did. But we look at this season, we look at how unprepared the Giants were this year, both personnel wise, scheme wise, and execution wise, especially on offense, particularly on offense, namely on offense. And, Brian Daboll has no leg to stand on when it comes to being an offensive expert. Let's see. Hunter says Antonio Pierce should be the DC if not kept. I do think that would be a very Giants thing to do. Call on somebody who has ties to the organization, who can get the fans fired up, try to move on in a PR sense from a disaster of losing such an accomplished coach who was creating results on the field as Martindale was for the team. Again, we're just talking about football here, right? So I definitely think that you can't rule that out. I mean, and also I would say just in positive light, obviously, whether Pierce gets the job in with the Raiders in Vegas or doesn't, I do think he's done a really good job with what he's been asked to do there. I know Mark Davis speaks highly of him, talked to him directly about it. And, it would be interesting to see then what Pierce would want to run and how they would go scheme-wise with the personnel they have as well. Mazzella says no word on Kafka, so that means he is staying. Well, as of now, that's what that means. We will see. I don't think anything is set in stone right now, given the way this organization is running and given where we stand. Let's see. Okay. Danny R says, I wouldn't mind if the Giants brought back a familiar face in Steve Spagnuolo to be our OC, our DC. Spags Giants days were amazing. Spags is the man. People love him. Coaches love him. Players love him. He's a really good coach. I have a hard time believing that Andy Reid would let him out of Kansas City. But we will see about that. But I agree. It would be great to have him. Let's see. Intel says Leslie Frazier. I do think that Leslie Frazier will clearly and definitely get an interview in this process. Could end up getting the job as well. Not sure that necessarily means the Giants are going to be fine because, again, he's going to be running a different defense. And also, frankly, based on what Martindale has accomplished and what Frazier has accomplished, you can't necessarily say you're going to have improvement. But the Giants have interviewed Frazier for a head coaching spot before. I think he was interviewed the same day. The Giants already had the press release written and sent out on the Friday that Brian Daboll was announced as the head coach about 2 years ago. So they definitely owe him at least one more interview. Let's see. Bobby Okereke is probably the most upset today. Wink really knew how to unlock his talent, says Jay Mazzella. I would agree with that based on everything Bobby has told me, both on my podcast, the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast, and what he said in the locker room after the win over the Eagles. And from what I understand, more than just Okereke, several players, not thrilled losing a great coach. Let's see. Danny R said Pat might be late because he's going to break the news on here tonight that Mike Kafka has resigned. Don't have that for you. Not yet. Anyway, you guys all saying I forgot about you. I did not. All right, let's see. Ken in Wisconsin says we need another press conference like tomorrow morning. Amen. I need to hear from John Mara, man. I need to hear from John Mara. What's going on here? He's got to talk. Right? I caught heat for saying he had to talk in week 4. Anyone who thought I was wrong for saying that then, What do you think now? Do you think I just say these things for my health? You think I just say these things to put pressure on John Mara because I like saying John Mara's under pressure? No, it's because there are things that are wrong that haven't been fixed, that if they don't get fixed, and that if ownership doesn't correct and doesn't address, they're going to fester and they're going to turn into what we're talking about now. Intel says, Pat, you were right. I was. Thank you very much. Like I said, you don't want a team to lose, but we try to bring you the information. And like I said, whether you are um, whether you are new to this or whether you are a returning fan, follower, and contributor, you know that we've been talking a lot on here for the better part of 2 months about the fact that there was going to be a high rate of turnover, at least 2 out of 3 coordinators gone. And 1 or 2 lives ago, when one of you guys, it might have been Jim, somebody asked me to rank the most likely to be gone to least likely to be gone. I did tell you Wink most likely to be gone of the 4 names that you gave me. And so remember, you can follow me at PL on NFL here on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I'm on X at PLeonardNYDN. I broke the news there and on Instagram that Martindale is resigning to pursue head coach and defensive coordinator opportunities. Also have the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast on the Believe Network. It's on the YouTube page in video form and also audio form wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Overcast, wherever you download those. Go subscribe and check them out. And of course, on the Daily News website, nydailynews.com. And here, when we are doing these chats, if you want your question or comment elevated to the top of the chat, you can pay money to buy a super chat or a super sticker and have your comment, question, or opinion elevated to the top of the queue. I'll jump right to it, get right to it, skip over everybody, and we will go right to you. It's a great way to support the channel here and support what we are doing. And you guys have done a great job of not only livening these and adding to these, and but also showing me that there is an appetite for this, there's an appreciation for this, and that not only will I give you guys information, but I get a lot from your guys' engagement and your support as well. So thank you so much. All right, let's see. Lou Ann says, hi, Pat. I'm not happy with Wink being gone. Daboll is hard-headed with this staff. He cannot treat his staff the way he does. You get to a championship when the team and coaches stay. Lack of continuity is not a good thing, Lou Ann, that's for sure. And you were always the optimist, and we like that attitude, and we love that about you. Never change, Lou Ann. But unfortunately, I had to be the realist in this situation and, of course, bring you the bad news. So Brett says Kafka chokes every time we need a quick, good play. I do think there's a lot of negativity around that kind of offensive dynamic. From what I understand, a lot of walking on eggshells when it comes to managing that side of the ball, calling that side of the ball. Just hasn't been a healthy culture, a game day dynamic, a sideline dynamic, and just not a lot of positivity about the way that Daboll has run the offense through Kafka and about how that has gone this season. Hunter says only reason why Kafka didn't quit is because he wouldn't get a better job elsewhere. That I think that could be part of it, because when you're connected to an offense that plays like this and a team that fares like this, it does, of course, damage your chances probably to move up in certain instances. Maybe Wink Martindale is the exception because his defense forced so many takeaways and did so well in certain areas. And I think what I have found is that people who understand football and watch football, people in the league, when they see Martindale leaving and resigning, they don't look at this as, wow, he failed and isn't the coach I thought he was. They look at it as, hey, good for a good coach to get out of a bad place, is I think what the feedback that I've gotten from people so far. Joey B. First of all, just want to say, give a shout out to Joey B Comedy. Joey B, follow him on Instagram. Great guy, Giants super fan, huge supporter, has been reaching out to other Giants fans to encourage them to come on to the channel and participate, join us here, and was really active on Instagram and on social media today, especially kind of rounding the troops up and getting everybody in here. So, Joey, thank you very much for doing that. Joey says, is it true Wink left because Daboll told him he was hitting Kev and Drew Wilkins? Wink told him F you and stormed out. So, Joe, I think there is truth to that order of things happening. There is definitely truth to the idea that the Wilkins firings was certainly a move designed to accelerate the process of separating from Martindale. And that partially is what led to Martindale resigning. I think, as I was explaining earlier, there are so many reasons why when we got to this point, to the end of this season, I think in one way or another, Martindale was not going to end up on the Giants in 2024, even though the Giants organization knew that that would not be good for them. But firing the Wilkins brothers on Black Monday basically dared Martindale to it didn't even dare him to do anything. I mean, it left him, from anyone's vantage point, no choice when there's like a provocation like that. It looks like the Giants, Brian Daboll, it looks like the Giants organization saying to Martindale, we know these are the people that mean the most to you, that work closest to you, that you trust most, and we are getting rid of them. What now? And that's coming from a Giants organization and a head coach who already know what their relationship is there, what the friction has been. And so it's almost like the gloves are off, right? That's kind of what that is. The gloves are off. And so, Joe, I think it would be fair to say that your characterization of what happened seems to me like it's not far off. Luann says, Giants cannot keep changing coaches. The defense has to learn a new system. You don't win championships this way. The team needs to stay together, and the defense loves Wink. Luann, I hate to say this, but this is trending towards the Giants needing at least a new head coach and maybe a new GM and head coach in 2025. That's where it's trending towards. And I think for the reasons you just said, you miss Tom Coughlin. Everybody around here does. Brett M says, I miss Joe Judge. Brett, I'll tell you what, man. Joe Judge, I know, listen, he needed a good offensive coordinator. He ends up with Jason Garrett at the beginning, and that was that and the Dave Gettleman. It was oil and water in both cases there. It wasn't going to work, and they just never got the offense right. But, if you had, let's say, a different offensive coordinator under Joe Judge with Pat Graham's defense, I thought Judge was a really good CEO. And I know there were some players who didn't like the way that he practiced, but also you come to the Joe Shane, Brian Daboll regime where it looks like in training camp, they're barely practicing at all. And guys are having rest days left and right. And then injuries are piling up. And so you're the player's buddy when you run an easy training camp, but then the team's not ready and gets whitewashed off the face of the earth in week 1 against the Cowboys. So what do you prefer? Jim Osborne says, Pat, thank you for coming on tonight. Prepare yourself for tons of venting here and very few questions. Acceptable, Jim, acceptable. And I know you guys kind of punched some of these in a little while ago, so I'm getting down to them at all as we go. Thank you very much for being patient. Like I said, super chats or super stickers if it can't wait. All right. Intel says, don't blame Mike Kafka. Blame Joe Shane for signing Daniel Jones for 4 years and $160 million. I'm glad you brought that up because I do want to hit on something that was very interesting today. So Joe Shane essentially admitted, let's see, we're talking about, evaluating players, right? And Joe Shane was talking about, how he approached the wide receiver room and how he approached the process in the offseason coming off of signing Daniel Jones to that mega deal. And he was talking about signing a guy like Paris Campbell, and then you had Wan'Dale Robinson coming off the ACL. He said you didn't know when he was going to be ready. We thought Paris would be a guy that could play inside and outside, and I wouldn't say we overcompensated, but we were trying to add some weapons. And then here's the quote from Joe Shane. You do a deal with Daniel and you see how it was structured. So you try to expedite the process and give him a chance to succeed. Expedite the process. Come on, what are we talking about? This is the same old Giants. You have a bad year, people get fired, you come in, you show a little promise. Instead of sticking with the process, it's, hey, let's accelerate the process. We're closer than we think. As John Mara famously said to Ian O'Connor then of the Post in the locker room after the win over the Vikings last year in the playoffs, we're back. No, you are not. It's one win. It's a part of the process. You're not back. It's not time to go all in. But you hear there, Joe Shane admitting it. Expediting the process. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. But that answers your question there and your comment about Joe Shane and Daniel Jones. You jogged my memory on that comment from Joe Shane that was really worrisome about, listen, this is endemic to the Giants. So it's not just the GM and the head coach. This is also the mistake that the ownership and that the organization consistently makes every 2 years. Let's see. Giants Chronicles says, yeah, us fans didn't fall for that by Daboll. We all knew what he was trying to make it look like. It was Wink's fault. All true and most invested fans blame this relationship on Daboll. Thank you, Chronicles, for having your eyes and ears open. Hunter says, can we say goodbye to Isaiah and Jihad now? 2 guys I wanted back. I think Isaiah Simmons, like if a team pays him to be in a similarly, multiple role where they're really taking advantage of all of his skills, then he could end up playing for the team where Wink Martindale is not the DC or head coach. But I do think we saw a player who really wrapped his arms around loving a defensive system and a coach. And so I wouldn't be shocked if he's playing for Wink Martindale wherever he is next year. Jihad Ward, I think, same deal. Like, he knows he's got a home and a friend in Wink, but also is would be able to play for somebody else who saw his value on a defensive line. And so, again, same like Simmons, possible, not definitely. But yeah, I would say more likely that those guys are not back with the Giants. That's what I would say than are. Tuto checks in with the $5 super chat. Let's go, Tuto. Massive salutes and big respects to Big Boss Pat and all diehard Giants fans in America. Hopefully, none and better coordinators will change the face of the Giants 2024. Tuto, from your lips to God's ears. We've had a busy Black Monday. I got to be honest, as you guys know from us sitting here, talking here, I knew it was going to be a tough day. I knew it was going to be a lot to follow, to break down. We haven't even talked yet about Saquon Barkley basically putting the organization on blast and saying, listen, if you're going to franchise tag me, just don't wait until March 5th. Either do it soon or let me go. Simple. Saquon Barkley saying the words, let me go. Imagine that not even being the top headline for the Giants, let alone in New York sports. Him saying that is really, really something. Tuto, thanks for checking in so much with the super chat and super sticker. And if you have any questions or extra comments, let me know. We'll get right to them. Brett says, I blame Shane for getting fancy cars and 10 slot receivers with the road still jacked up. Brett, well said. Well said. Intel says, let Daboll run his team if he didn't get a long wink with Wink, it's life. Well, he's going to have to run his team now because it's on him, because this year has been a train wreck and now it's on him or else. So A2Z Me says, so the new coaching staff will get a year with no real pressure because it's their first season. The organization is stuck in a whirlpool of pointlessness, in my opinion. Oh, I don't think the new coaching staff will get a year with no pressure because it's their first season at all. That's what I think is part of the huge problem here. I think the Giants ownership is looking at this saying, wait, what is going on here? Right? We knew the season was bad, but it's this bad, right? Like that's what Wink Martindale's resignation should be telling the Giants, which really they should have already known. But if they didn't know, they definitely know now, which is, as I've been saying, the autopsy was going to be ugly. And so I think that's what makes this such a pressure cooked 2024 season to me, is that now you're going to be adding all these new coaches and pieces, but with no long leash, no long leash at all is what I see. So yeah, no, A to Z me. I think there's gonna be a lot of pressure on the 2024 season now. Luann says I wanted Wink to stay. Daboll is a little rough on his coach. Is very upset about this. We will be set back again. I agree. I don't know what ownership can look at to be positive. Seems like Daboll ran a really dysfunctional operation behind the scenes this year with all these firings. And like I said, you could hang your hat on the defense, but now the defensive coordinator's gone. And honestly, if you're John Mara, like I haven't even really talked about this. If you're John Mara, aren't you sitting Brian Daboll down right now and saying, Brian, right? And even Joe Schoen, why was your plan to drive Wink Martindale out of the organization? Right? Like if that's what the firing of the Wilkins is, that's what it looks like, right? So if that's what it was, then if you're Giants ownership, if you're Steve Tisch, you're John Mara, like as you and I talk right now on YouTube live here on the Talkin Ball breaking news edition with Pat Leonard talking about Wink Martindale resigning and all these coach firings, Giants ownership has to be asking them, what was the plan here? How is this a positive, right? Like, why are we supposed to believe in what you're doing when this is what's going on here? Tuto again with a $5 super chat. Tuto, really appreciate you, man. Big Boss Pat, we've got 2 more matches left in our season, and we'll put everything on the line as if we were at the finals. Please pray for our victims and the bags. Yes. Tuto, we will be watching, hopefully, when your matches are on Peacock, and you are one of the most loyal followers on here, a huge supporter, and a great example you're setting right now of the super chats and the super stickers that you can drop in to support the channel and also to elevate your comments to the top of the chat. I really do appreciate you, man. I know I say it all the time. I probably sound like a broken record, but I really do. Molly Mall says, please don't trade up for a QB. Intel says if they don't draft a QB, Joe Schoen will be the ex-Giants GM. Yes, yeah, it's a really tough call. Adam F says you guys are seriously crying over losing a D coordinator of the 27th ranked defense. We can do a lot better. Adam, nobody's crying. I just think clearly the biggest positive was the defense. Of course, as Martindale said himself, the run defense was not good enough, but clearly I thought, from what you could see, that even though they attacked that personnel-wise in the offseason, still did not do a good enough job there. And also, Adam, like if we're just being fair and talking about the full context of the Giants situation and their team, I think it is definitely true that if you're going to say, if you're going to call out the defense was 27th ranked, I would think if you were a football fan who watched these games from start to finish, you would know that the offense, the team averaged 15.6 points per game, which was 30th in the league. And that is only thanks to 3 defensive touchdowns and 1 punt return. So the offense's average would be lower than that, probably closer to 15. I can't do that math off the top of my head. But the bottom line, what I'm getting at is, Adam, the full picture of this, if you watch the Giants week in and week out, like, listen, there were some games where the defense didn't play well enough, right? Like the Miami Dolphins game, the defense was the only reason the Giants were anywhere close at any point in that game, but they did score, right? I think they scored the only touchdown of the game, but of course gave up a lot of big plays, whatever, to one of the most explosive offenses in the league. But really, like the Dallas Cowboys game was kind of the game where the defense's wheels fell off. The Raiders game was a tough one too. But remember, that was right around the time that Joe Schoen traded Leonard Williams off the team. So the defense discouraged by losing him. And also, that was just a point in the season where they were exhausted from having to try to play, flawless ball to help the team even stay in games because they couldn't score any offensive points. And so you're absolutely right to cite the stats, like they're facts, right? So if you say the defense gave up we didn't rank well in points and yards and those things down the stretch and overall. Like nobody's saying that that's inaccurate. But I just think that the story of the Giants season is clearly that offensively, they were a very bad team. They were one of the worst teams in the league on offense and one of the worst Giants offenses in a long time. And I think that the defense at a lot of times was at a disadvantage because of what they were playing with on the offensive side of the ball. And of course, special teams had its moments, but positively and negatively, killer moment right off the bat against Dallas Cowboys, obviously, poor special teams against, I think it was the Seahawks, and on and on. So Adam, you bring a good perspective and another side of the story there. And I appreciate that, but I do think mentioning the defense's ranking without discussing what the team looked like is not really an accurate depiction of what the defense's ranking means, if that makes sense. Luann says maybe Daboll has to go. He's too rough on his players and coaches. Molly Mall says they had an opportunity to get a QB. They chose Daniel Jones. Correct. Their job is linked to Daniel, in my opinion, because they keep doubling down on him. That really could be the case, Molly Mall, when all is said and done. Luann says, so defense has to learn another system. We will not get to a Super Bowl this way. I agree. Brett M says the schedule makers hated the Giants this year. It was a tough schedule. I can promise you one thing, Brett. Not a lot of primetime games for the Giants in 2024. I can promise you that. Why was there no mention of the Wilkins firings in the presser, says Ken. Ken, that's a good question. I do believe the Wilkins stuff and those conversations were happening at some point in the morning. Might have been after the presser, though, I believe. And, I think it was all calculated the way the Giants ran the day from, announcing the McGahee and Johnson firings at the press conference, and then saying we're not going to discuss it. And then the Wilkins firings happening and leaking out, and, them talking about how they expect Kafka and Daboll to stay, or Kafka and Martindale to stay, putting pressure on the coordinators and their decisions and putting the onus on them, even though they hadn't spoken with Daboll in any sort of exit meeting fashion yet. And how strange was it that the Giants didn't have individual exit player meetings on breakup day, a change from last year, very unusual. I think some of the players thought it was a bit strange. Obviously, some of them don't mind getting out of there quickly, but they had like a group free agent meeting. Very weird. Very weird. I mean, just a not a lot of things to feel good about today. If you're a Giants fan. Danny R. Let's see. Luann says Giants will not find a better DC. Hard to believe they would upgrade there right now. Danny R says, hey, Pat, do you see the Giants targeting T. Higgins in free agency? They do need a number one, so I think any potential number one out there is in play. T would cost you a pretty penny, though. I think I saw Jason Fitzgerald saying that he projected the Giants to have $20 million or $25 million in cap space. That's not a crazy amount of cap space, right? But of course, Joe Shane last year when they needed a number one wide receiver, slim pickings when it came to the names out there. So I think he'll enjoy at least pursuing the possibility of watching film and looking into what that would look like. But definitely feels like something the Giants would get outbid for, even if they were in, to me. Especially like, why would T. Higgins go somewhere where he can't win, which is probably the balance of what the Giants will be next year. Luann says, it seemed like last season Daboll and Wink were close. I think that was probably just appearances to you and to people. Pat, do you think Giants go 4-3 and move Thibodeau to left defensive end, Lawrence to 3 tech, Ashawn if re-signed to 1 tech, and Aziz to right D end? I mean, listen, you go in with Leslie Frazier or somebody else with a new system, I think it's a good chance that you end up in a 4-3, and then you do end up having to move these guys around and kind of reassign them, which I think would be a challenge in and of itself, let alone trying to get back to better football next year. So yes, Rec Laws, I think that's a good projection there by you. James Lisa says, worst nightmare is that Wink winds up on the Eagles. Yeah, so I can tell you this too. I think because so like if Martindale's resigning, right, to pursue another defensive coordinator opportunity, technically it's a possibility that instead of just letting him out for anything, the Giants could try to control in some sort of fashion on their end where he ends up. So, some teams try to control a guy going in division, some teams try to control going in conference, whatever it is. But I think, you could see probably the Giants trying to control Martindale going to a division rival, but maybe outside of that, it's really hard to see them trying to control much about his movement. As far as like, hey, we don't want you going anywhere. I mean, they probably, I would think, don't want to compete against him twice a year in division, knowing what he could do to them with his scheme and knowing what he's done for them on their own defense. So I think whether it's for a head coaching job or just a DC job elsewhere, I think outside of a few of those exceptions, like you said, maybe division rivals, I don't think you'll see a block. Let's see. I guess my point is, James, like I think if the Giants have the ability to prevent him from going to the Eagles, that would probably be something that they could possibly do, is try to prevent that. Chronicle says, I will say Pat did warn us about this bloodbath. I did. Brett M says how Daboll handled injuries and reporting was sketchy all season, robotic. Yep. And look at the injury situations, right? You had Andrew Thomas, Tyree Phillips, Evan Neal, Graham Gano. A lot of situations where, whether it was a guy coming back too quickly, going back into a game, using a guy when you knew it was already hurt, whatever it was. Daniel Jones going back onto the field after that play where he had obviously hurt his knee. Just very strange handling, discussions of it. Like you said, the reporting of it or not reporting of it, very odd. Yo Elvis says, Pat, if Brock Bowers is there at 6, do the Giants take him? Draft a tight end at 6? You're asking me? Geez, I don't know. You think a tight end worth it there when you need offensive linemen? I don't know. Good player, but I think drafting a tight end over an offensive lineman at that spot would probably cause a riot. But I mean, you tell me. You would want him there? Brett M says Carl Banks should be the linebacker coach. Intel says, yes, we're going back to a 4-3. Hunter says, I think we should start over. Enough of the Bills stuff. He needs to get out of the Bills coaching tree. Can't disagree with you there based on the results we've seen so far. A lot of pressure on this season. Brett says Wink is going to run stunts on us every play. We're drafting a receiver and 7 linemen. Can't wait. Intel says, I still want your pick on which QB you like. Intel, I swear, I still haven't made my pick yet. What can save Daboll and Shane is trading up to get Caleb Williams. Shane, you are on the clock. Make the call to the Bears now. Hirsch for real is in the house. What's up, Hirsch? Thanks for joining as always. Molly Mall says, sounds like you have info you can't really speak on. Born for Sports says, what percent? All in due time, Molly Mall. All in due time. What percentage do you give Shane will trade up for a quarterback in the draft? Born for Sports says, listen, I think everything's on the table. I get 25% chance of everything, right? Like I think everything's on the table for him right now. Hirsch says, Pat, just curious. Let's say Shane does trade up to get the Bears' number 1 pick. Which one do you think would be his pick? I don't know. I think Caleb Williams, I think looks like a personality who would be interesting in New York, not the prototypical like Giants selection, a guy who already deep in the NIL game. But of course, with Joe Shane here, they drafted Kayvon Thibodeau, a guy who a lot of people pre-draft were saying things about whatever personality, focus, off field, whatever it was. And so I think with Shane here, I do think that a player like that, a personality like that is on the table. But be interesting to see. I can't answer right now who his pick is going to be. That's going to be if he did pick a quarterback at 1 or somewhere up top of the draft, a lot of my job in the next month or two was going to be to try to determine who that would be. Danny R says Joey B is my guy. Chronicle says Daboll came to fix our flaws and issues on offense, and it seems like hasn't improved at all. Why? I want answers, and it doesn't seem like he takes much accountability. Yeah, John Middlecoff said something on his podcast about a month ago that Daboll does a lot of screaming but doesn't present a lot of solutions from the people that he had talked to, and that sounds like a fair review of what the scene is right now. Hunter says black eye wink leaving for us. Hope not for him. I hope he excels in his next job. Brett says he can't be the head coach of the Giants if he's the DC. Smart move, wink, playing chess. Doug says, did you mean Kafka was walking on eggshells with the offensive dynamic? Yes. Brian Boyle says, Pat, through all the changes and subsequently failures attributed to coaches and players the past 12 years, the one constant is Mara, Tisch. What's your thought on their failures? Yeah, Brian, I think from their analytics department to their inability to stick with a long-term process, to find a process and to stick with it. And I think there's a lot of people who work in the building in different departments who have been there for a while. I think reevaluation is always a good thing. I have harped a lot on the injuries. I think they have not done a good enough job of fully evaluating and turning over every stone of what is going on there. A lot of people have been there for a long time in that department. I just think too much stagnant, lack of movement, lack of reevaluation, lack of unwillingness to change in those regards, and really just whether it's poor identification of leadership in some of these hires. But board, Brian, listen, I don't know if it would have worked out or not, but like the Joe Judge regime was hey, you guys will have 3 years, right? And you marry him with Dave Gettleman and Jason Garrett. After 1 year, everybody in the organization and around the Giants organization is raving about Joe Judge as the second coming. And then suddenly in 2021, things go poorly. He's a dope and he gets fired, right? According to the Giants, right? Well, that was a 3-year process that maybe if Joe Judge stays into year 3 and they get that cupcake schedule that the Giants had last year in 2022 and Joe Judge is the coach, maybe Joe Judge takes them to the playoffs that year. And then maybe Joe Judge went almost making the playoffs during the pandemic, down season in 2021, bounce back, making the playoffs in 2022. And let's say he makes it and wins a playoff game. Now you have a coach going into his 4th season, right? Continuity on staff, continuity with players, same draft process. Then you eventually have Dave Gettleman moving on. You marry a general manager with Joe Judge as the head coach. You have some alignment in that regard. Now, I'm just using Judge as the example because that was the previous regime to the one we're talking about now. But you asked the question, Brian, which is a good one about Mara and Tisch and where their consistent failures lie. And I think it's the inability to stick with a sound process. That's what I really do believe. Let's see. Hunter says, I would try to push the pod to Giants fans around here, but I live in Patriots country. Well, the podcast is not all Giants, Hunter, so it is an NFL podcast as well. Obviously, I'm around the Giants a lot, so I specialize in them at times on the podcast, but I do use the podcast to continue to branch around the league as well. So you can still recommend it to them. I talk Bill Belichick on there. I talk Patriots. I talk AFC East as well. We talk Jets, which often lends itself to dancing around into Patriots territory as well. So, please keep pushing it up there too. We have something for everybody. Antonio, what's up, Antonio? He says, do you think Leslie Frazier will be a top candidate for the Giants at defensive coordinator? I do think he will be one of them. Yes. Hunter says, rank the last 3 regimes we have had. Daboll, Joe Judge, Gettleman, Daboll and Shane, Joe Judge, Gettleman, and then Ben McAdoo, Gettleman. I really did think Joe Judge was a good CEO. I would say if you had Judge as the coach and a guy with Joe Shane's process and detail, but more experience, that would be kind of the best marriage of all of that. Cutting corners doesn't win anything, says Hunter. Last year was a fever dream. Tuto, thank you again for the super chats. Really appreciate you. Doug Analytics says, I took Shane's expedite the process answer as why they front loaded the Daniel Jones contract so they could get out of it in a few years if needed, unlike the Hurts backloaded contract. Well, no, he was also saying that you were trying to expedite the process around Daniel because of how you structured Daniel's contract to maximize the first 2 years window. That's how I took that comment. Mara also said, according to Brett, says, we've done everything we can to screw this kid up about Daniel Jones. The line is still and always has been the problem. We're not getting a quarterback with that 6th pick, not if it's up to Mara. Definitely, that's well said, Brett. Well said, going back to what John said. Let's see. Fans interacting, another good example of what we can do here. Sometimes you and I are talking. Sometimes you guys are talking amongst yourselves. Great community we're building here on YouTube on the PLNFL channel on the Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard. Live Q&A podcasts here, brought to you by me, brought to you by the Daily News, brought to you by the Believe Network and Bet Online and Estate 98 Coffee at Estate 98 Coffee on Instagram. It's an Esencia Day Cafe from El Salvador. I would really pick it up online. It's a coffee concentrate. You put a tablespoon in a glass with some ice and water and stir it, and you have instant iced coffee. It's excellent. Can't recommend it highly enough. Support that small growing business as well. It's a great stuff. And a reminder, super chats and super stickers, you can pay for your comment and question to be elevated right to the top of the chat. You are here with me, Pat Leonard. I'm the one who broke the news today, of course, that Wink Martindale is resigning as the defensive coordinator of the Giants to pursue head coaching and defensive coordinator opportunities. I would expect there to be a strong market for Wink. Of course, it could end up being a DC job. Sometimes tougher to get head coaching jobs when you're coming from a losing situation like this. But I think people around the league know his value. You saw Sean McVay raving about him, Jason Kelsey, the Eagles center, raving about how difficult it is to play against him. So those are things that I think are important when we come down the pike. All right, let's see. Hunter says, any other players on defense you think want out now that Wink is gone? I wouldn't say that one out. I would just say, like these players appreciated Wink. Bobby Okereke appreciated Wink. Xavier McKinney appreciated Wink. Even Xavier McKinney and Wink had their, the midseason kind of public fallout there of Martindale putting him on blast, for McKinney putting the coaches on blast. And that was really just an example of, holding a player accountable, keeping the defense together, keeping people locked in, stop the finger pointing, let's play better ball and lift each other up. And I think in the end, from what I gather, McKinney telling me he was buying those shoes for Martindale at Christmas as a Christmas present. I think they saw the value that they brought each other. And so, even a player like that I think a lot of people would assume, that Martindale and McKinney, that they were not each other's favorite. I think in the end, they ended up being people who really did see eye to eye, and that, each one would miss the other. Right. That's what I see. Listen, the players know Wink is a really good coach. I mean, how about Dexter Lawrence? Dexter Lawrence earned that big contract, and credit to him for playing. But, Wink Martindale identifying Dexter Lawrence as the player he was, putting him in that position to succeed and to capitalize in the interior of the defensive line, facing up against the center as the nose, and just dominating and being the dominant player that gets voted now to a second straight Pro Bowl. Even though even his numbers weren't the same that they were last year, but now his reputation is carrying, and teams know that they have to prepare for Dexter Lawrence now if they're going to have any success against the Giants. And Martindale and his usage of Dexter Lawrence has kind of cultivated that and helped him grow. Molly Mall says, instead of getting all those receivers, they should have addressed the O-line and coach earlier. Indeed. What player or coach with options is coming to the Giants, says Patrick. I think that question answered itself, Patrick. I agree. We get dominated by the Cowboys and Eagles up front every year, and he thought we needed more wide receivers. I know it's Molly Maw, I'm telling you, man. And the Giants still don't fully understand, or this regime doesn't seem to fully understand how critical it is not to get like whitewashed up and down the field a lot of the times when you're playing the Cowboys and the Eagles. Like that matters how you fare against those teams. And then, of course, how about this? You finally beat the Eagles for the first time in forever, and the defense forces 4 turnovers to help your offense then capitalize and go out to a 24-0 halftime lead and a 27-10 victory. And then what happens? The next day, your defensive coordinator resigns as you fire the two of the assistants he worked closest to, along with 2 more coaches on the staff. What an organization. What an organization. Luann says, I'm really upset Wink is gone. Now the defense will be different and not happy. Luann says, Mara should step in. Yeah, I really want to hear from him, man. Really want to hear from him. Let's see. If Wilkins wasn't Wink's right-hand man, says Doug, would you honestly be surprised with his firing? Outside linebackers underperformed and didn't develop, in my opinion. But Doug, if you looked at the Giants and their performance this year, and you listed all the position coaches and coordinators top to bottom, are you telling me you would fire the outside linebackers coach before you fired the receivers coach or the tight ends coach or the offensive line coach or the quarterbacks coach or the running backs? Like I'm saying, the offense has been historically bad this year, historically bad, both for the franchise and in the NFL. Now, I mean, have the Giants' edges been dominant this season? No, they haven't been at all. But what was their room, first of all? Kayvon Thibodeau, right, a number 5 overall pick. Aziz in and out of the lineup due to health. You have Jihad Ward, who more of a run stopper, but did have 5 sacks this season, but, a veteran. 2 of the guys who last year helped them most in the pass rush on edge, Tamon Fox and O'Shane Ximenez, often were not activated really most of the season. O'Shane ended up getting cut. Fox might have only played in 1 game, and these were players that, Martindale and Drew Wilkins valued, but they couldn't get up to the game day roster. So, you tell me, Doug, why weren't they playing if they helped them get to the quarterback last year? You tell me. Danny says, you think Daboll just turned off free agents from coming here with today's crap show? I think the play of the team and then this kind of thing, I think players are scratching their head both in the building and out of the building. Yes. A2Z Me says, great conversation, Pat. Thanks for the energy you put into your work. Go Blue. Thank you, A2Z Me, for being here, for always being here, for participating and supporting. I really appreciate you saying that. Scott Tam says, I think Daboll should take more blame. He deserves more blame. Scott Tam says, Wink was the best coach in the Giants. Brett says the defense stepped up big time in the second half of the season. I said it many weeks ago that if I were Wink, I would be pissed at the offense. I bet that's when it all started. That certainly didn't help. Scott Tam says, I think free agents will be turned off. Vince says, I heard Saquon refuse the exit meeting. Yeah, so here's what happened. The Giants came in today. They had a team meeting as players, and then they had some other group meetings like a free agent meeting, a rookie meeting, a second-year players meeting, things like that. But there were no individual player exit meetings. A lot of players I talked to were kind of confused by it. I do know this apparently is something that the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick tend to do at times, that they have kind of like position coaches meet with the players as groups quickly, but by and large, there's no review with the GM and the head coach with the players. So, Daboll may be a year or in his second year pulling from his New England roots, because the Giants did have exit meetings last year under Shane and Daboll after their first season, after they won a playoff game. But now they opt not to after their team slides back into the NFC's basement. So, but here's what happened with Saquon is there were no individual exit player meetings, but there was like an open door policy. So if players wanted to, they were told that they could pop upstairs and have a conversation. But Barkley, I was standing right there. He said, "No, I'm good." And listen, if they were mandatory and they were organized, he would have been in his exit meeting, but they didn't hold one. So he was out of there. And let me tell you, man, he said, "Listen, we had all this. We talked enough last offseason, negotiations, not just with Joe, but just negotiations in general." He said, "They know how they can reach me. They know how I can reach my agents." And he said, he put them on notice, man. He said, "Let me go if you're not going to tag me. And if you're going to tag me, don't wait until March 5th to do it. Just tell me what it's going to be and let's get it done one way or another." Really, to me, I think Saquon sounds like a guy who is planning on playing somewhere else next year. Mark says, "Hi, Pat. I probably need more than one comment to gather my thoughts and queries. There has to be more to this story. It comes across that Daboll is the problem. Why did the players continue to play hard?" I think Daboll has worked very hard at giving the players what they want, at keeping the locker room happy. Whether it was like down the stretch of the season, the last 3 weeks of the season, they barely practiced at all. The players obviously love that, keeps their bodies fresh. And just one example of like doing things that are kind of going to curry the players' favor. I think that going back to how they practiced or didn't practice in training camp, you saw a lot of resting and things that were player friendly. I just think they do a lot of things to cater to the players. And so the players don't have a problem with it because a lot of times it results in you going easier on them, even if it's not the best thing for them. But they don't buck, like Joe Judge. If you're practicing harder, some guys complain and they complain to other people in the building. And then that's how, fractions start forming like that. And so I think Daboll has been very careful to manage the locker room in that regard while all of this ugliness has been happening. But trust me, it has seeped in. The players understand what's going wrong. And now I think after today's news, they really fully understand how bad it is and that there are real consequences to the behaviors that they are not necessarily seeing right in front of their face of the people that they are working with, but that are undercutting maybe their efforts to try to win these games. Shane Hall says free agents care about money, period. There is something to be said for individual motivations there. Like the Giants have a ton of guys on this team who, to Shane's point, were playing for their next contract. Even think of a guy like Tyrod Taylor. Like he was obviously not pleased with Joe Shane, Brian Daboll, and the Giants when he came back healthy from 4 broken ribs, and they still started Tommy DeVito over him for, 2 more games? But so when Tyrod comes back in, he's still playing hard because he's playing for his next contract, wherever that's going to be. And especially in an NFL now that is desperate for good quarterback play, what he's put on tape this year is going to get him a job somewhere. You better believe it, right? So I think some of the playing hard has to do with that. And also there are good guys on this team. I mean, I could go on, but just guys like Darius Slayton, Justin Pugh, Bobby Okereke, Xavier McKinney, I don't know. Even, Saquon, Ben Bredesen, Andrew Thomas, I could go on, but they had a lot of pride, personal pride in what they were doing, and so did the coaches, who were, a lot of them, knowing that they were likely coaching for their next job as well. Excuse me. All right. Coming down the stretch here, I want to get to all your questions before we hang up here. We're an hour and 15 in, going strong. This is awesome, guys. This is awesome. Thank you so much for making this such a rewarding experience every time we do it. I really do enjoy talking to you guys and trying to download and kind of bounce ideas off each other as well. Scott Tam says, how could we go into the year with this O-line? Yeah, I mean, Scott, one thing that was really damaging right away was Joe Shane came in off the bat. He drafts Evan Neal, Josh Azudu, Marcus McKeithen, and signs Mark Lewinsky. Now, you cannot sit here today and call any of those 4 additions last year a success, right? You draft John Michael Schmitz, who is a rookie this year, but even he described his season as disappointing overall. Like I talked to him about it. He said that, he there were good things. He's not just saying it was all bad, but um, he's disappointed and feels like he's got a lot to work on. And now, listen, John Michael is a rookie. You're not supposed to have to bring in a rookie center and have him solve all your problems, right? And I know that the offensive linemen don't love the fact that Bobby Johnson lost his job, and they're all good guys who feel ownership in the fact that somebody lost their job on their watch, even though it wasn't all them. As I wrote in the Daily News for Tuesday's paper, part of what didn't help is Tommy DeVito led the NFL in sack percentage. I think it was 15 and a half or something percent, had the highest sack percentage of dropbacks of any quarterbacks who had more than 33 dropbacks this season during the 2023 NFL regular season. So he took a lot of sacks, which ended up ballooning their number, helping to balloon their number into like historical territory where they ended up giving up 85 sacks on the season, which is the second most all time since they started tracking the stat in 1963. That's courtesy of Elias Sports Bureau. But Scott, especially Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, like their lack of recognition of what kind of disaster their depth would be. Like, Josh Azudu, they were trying to force him into a starting guard spot, and he couldn't win that job. So then they ended up making him their swing tackle with Matt Peart down. And then they cut Tyree Phillips, who was good for them last year. And then Daniel Jones gets hurt while it's Josh Azudu in at left tackle. But Josh, you can't blame him because he shouldn't have been playing there in the first place. Like, that's why it's not just Bobby Johnson. We're not just talking about development here. The Jets' second half, I believe, when we ran the ball every play and the crowd chanted, "Let him throw it, wink, Daboll, rift." That's what Brett thinks. I mean, Brett, you could just throw a dart and hit a game where the offense's poor play and poor game management on Daboll's part or on the Giants' staff's part as a whole led to frustrations. But that would be certainly one of them, a game like that. You think Saquon's agents are realistic this time around? I don't think Saquon is going to get even near that 12 he would have last year, says Chronicles, especially if he hit the market. I think the most is 10 APY. Chronicles, I think there's a good bet that Saquon, at this point, now I'm not speaking for him or his agents. I'm just saying, I think if Saquon could, like you said, recognize that he's going to get a little less money than he would have in the past, but he's going to be in a position to be on a winning team where his workload can look a little bit lighter, but he can still make big time plays and hopefully play in bigger games. Like, I think he's getting to that point in his career where that's probably something that he would look into accepting, as an option. So I do, I think that is a realistic possibility. Scott Tam says, I have little faith in this staff right now. You shouldn't have a lot of faith in it. Thompson says the defense was better than the offense, but it isn't like if the defense was so fabulous, the offense was so really bad. Why is Dave? But the offense was so bad. Why is Daboll keeping Kafka? If he is keeping Kafka, like I said right at the top, Mark, like it's unclear other than it just looks even worse to have 3 coordinators go than 2 now. I mean, other than that, it's hard to explain. Hunter says, shouldn't have a say where he goes. If you treated him right, he wouldn't have left. Right, that the Giants shouldn't be able to control it. Yeah, no, I agree with that in theory, Hunter, but, maybe with the contract, they can control that a little bit. Scott says the defense wasn't that bad, in my opinion. They carried the team, and with a better offense, the defense would have been better. Scott, totally. I think citing defensive stats without citing the offensive problems and the way this team and season were run is disingenuous. And there are people on Twitter doing just that, by the way, which to me sounds like selling the company line. Dexter is best at nose tackle. Changing the defense might not be in his best interest, says Molly Mall. Again, agree. Scott says injured players have to be blamed on Daboll, not just this year either. But it goes above the head coach and GM as well. Like that injury thing is something that goes, to the medical staff, to the training staff, Ronnie Barnes, the Giants ownership. How do they practice? What do they do? All that stuff. You know what I mean? Like it all goes in. It all goes in the pot. Let's see. Yeah, too many holes for this team to draft a tight end that high. This looks to me like a total organizational failure. Shane and Daboll have to learn from this, says Mark. Agree. Um, this looks to me like we're looking for a new coach after next year. I agree. Does Tyrod saying that this is the closest locker room he has been a part of mean anything? Who do you attribute that positive to? Mark, I think the play like I do think the Giants have a lot of good players, like good people in their locker room. I do think that. I do think that between the previous regime and this regime and the players they had in the locker room, I do think or I'm sorry, and the people running the team and who they've drafted and added, I do think there's a majority of guys in the locker room who seem like very good guys or who are very good guys and good humans. And so I think that combined with the fact that there was kind of so much mental and emotional adversity they faced this season, I think they just ended up hunkering down and kind of working it out together. I also think Justin Pugh returning, doing those offensive line dinners, but then included, the quarterbacks and adding other people into the fold. I thought that helped as well. I know that helped. Scott says, from the soft preseason to bad play calls to not handling injuries, what does Daboll do well? I think he really does have to look in the mirror after this year. Mark says Barkley's exit comments are concerning. Was last season a fluke, Pat? I do think that last season will end up having been the anomaly. Rick says, sorry to join late, Pat. Keep up the great work. It's okay, Rick. I joined late as well. And it is late, but we're still rocking and rolling here. You guys are still jumping in, so I'm in with you. Let's see. Molly Mall says, trading up will eat our assets and ability to build the team. Also, you'll have to play that quarterback. Sitting DJ at his cap hit shows incompetence. Scott says, Judge wasn't the guy, though. In my opinion, he's just not an NFL head coach. Be a good college coach. But he's too hard-headed to handle grown men. Yeah, I don't agree with that. People got to stop hating on Daniel Jones. No QB would succeed with this O-line. That was true in the early going of the season. Molly Mall says, watching the national championship game. What do you know? Michael Penix struggling under pressure. Saw the same thing with Caleb Williams. Some fans are delusional. Scott says it's been 10 years since we had a decent O-line. Joe checking in. Thank you, Joe, with the $1.99, $2 super chat. And he says, do you feel Daboll is disrespectful to the media? Joe, I think that some of the dismissive answers can be. I also, listen, this is the one thing I think is disrespectful above all is dishonesty when it comes from anybody, a coach, a GM, a player, a fellow media member, when you're having a conversation, a family member, whoever. Like dishonesty and intentional misleading, I think, is disrespectful. I do think that there's been a lot of efforts this season in regards to your question to not help. I think maybe the tenor changed down the end of the season when things started getting bad and the pressure started ratcheting up. But I do think that Daboll and the Giants as a whole, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, I think if they were, stop reading everything on social media and paying attention to everything said about you and griping and quipping with it and just work on your process. It's about wins and losses. It's what it's about. And the media is not out to get you. Promise you that. We all want a winner. We want a Super Bowl champion so we can write a book that everyone's going to buy. That's what I always tell people. That, I want the Giants to win. I want the Giants to do well. I want players to go to the Pro Bowl. I want them to be all pros. I want them to be great stories. I want them to have success in their careers. And then I want to tell their stories. And I want to share that with you guys and have them on the podcast. And I wish the year I was going to Las Vegas with the Giants and covering them day in and day out and bringing you content from the strip and, talking about all that. Like, that's what I wish. Like, that's what I want. That's what I want. The losing and the negativity and the doom and gloom is exhausting. But this is like, I'm just reporting what's going on with the organization. Like, first several years I was on this beat, it's like people were like, this is Pat Leonard. He's like out to get the Giants. Meanwhile, they're essentially setting records for futility and barely winning a game. It's like all we're doing is covering the team and the way that they're running, right? That's all we're doing. Last year, you go to the playoffs. Hey, things are looking up, but it's still a process. Oh, no, it's time to try to push forward and think that we're closer than we really are in 2023. Here come the wheels falling off again. Let's see. All right. Going to try to rapid fire these here. Let's see. Brett says he loves the Patriots. They were part Giants at one time. Parcells, Meggett, plus Eli Hall of Fame. No problem with Brady. Scott doesn't like the QBs in the draft. Hunter says the X and Wink stuff looks like tough love. From the outside perspective, looks like Wink could be a hard ass, but had players' best intentions in mind. Yeah, I don't think he was a hard ass. It just seemed like he didn't like the fact that McKinney had gone public with that because it looked like fracturing and pointing fingers when fingers could have been pointed in all different directions. And I think it was just a way to kind of like, hey, let's stick together is the way I viewed it. He clearly, though, didn't appreciate being put on blast publicly. To be honest, I wish Wink was our head coach. I feel he held people accountable and allowed guys to have open conversations. This just doesn't look good for us. I agree, Scott. Scott, great contributions down the stretch here. This chat really appreciate you. Did Jihad Ward get more snaps this game to put it to the Giants a little and get that $250K? Wink might have turned the screwdriver a little. Brett, unfortunately, even though Ward did get the $250K for his sack, he did not get the $250K for the 60%. He fell just under 59%, I think, for the season, even though he played a good amount in the finale. So Wink wasn't able to get him that other $250K there. Intel says Michigan won. Now that Jim won his championship, says Hunter, is he coming to the NFL or staying in Michigan? I think he's coming to the NFL, Hunter. I think this is the year. I think a lot of people seem to think Chargers or Raiders for Harbaugh. We will see. I think he would have his pick. That's for sure. Hunter says, I think we need to move on from Aziz. I like his upside, but him never on the field makes it hard for any consistent product either when he's a key part. Yeah, definitely hard to count on a player to be one of your leading sack getters and pass rushers when you can't guarantee that he's going to be healthy. I think that's fair at this point after this year. Though I always do cite that the 1 year there he played with Joe Judge. I think he played every game that season when they practiced hard. Scott says the DeVito thing was dumb. Tyrod should have been playing as soon as he was ready. Yeah, I thought it was funny when Joe Shane said that the team was competitive down the stretch. And then he said, look at us against the Eagles, the Rams, and even the second half against the Eagles. It was like, what was the consistency there? It was Tyrod playing quarterback, right? That was the consistent thing. Let's see. 85 people in here. Great group of Giants fans and NFL fans. That's right, Hunter. We are rocking. Joey B says, if we draft a quarterback, do you see a scenario where Daniel Jones is traded to another team? Also, I don't think we should draft O-line. I think we need free agents who are quality. I'd really like Harrison Jr. Well, so Joey, you think sign some free agents on the O-line or what? Because you do have to add to this O-line for sure in a significant way. To answer your question, I do think like I brought this up in the last chat, but now listen, obviously, you don't want the Giants trading out of the top 10. You want to take a great player there or whatever. But, like what if a team tried to come up for the Giants pick in exchange for the Giants being able to dump Daniel Jones's salary and still get a quarterback in the middle first round, right? Get more assets along with it, whether it's more draft picks in this, whether it's like an extra first next year as well. Is that something you would do? Right. I think those are things those are tires you gotta kick if you're Joe Shane. So that's a possibility. Like I think I always say this about Joe Shane, but like, I think he has a process and I think he does look at all his options. So um, I think he'll look at that one. Mark says, Pat, you have been so forthcoming with us. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you, Mark. Scott says, Phillips looked like he got better in 6 weeks of Philly than 2 years here. JMS didn't get better. He played better to start the year. Bobby Johnson had to go. Saquon wants to win. He's tired of this poop. Let's see. Well, Tyree was pretty good for the Giants last year, though, too. But yeah, no, going to Philly and look at me yawning here, old man, getting some tutelage and mentorship from Stoutland does not hurt. Let's see. Pat, other than speculating, do we have any evidence-based explanation on why Wink left? What do you mean speculating, Mike? What are you talking about? I'm not speculating at all. I already told you. What do you mean? It's it's connected to the fact that the Giants losing, the poor management of the team, the poor management of the offense, the fact that the offense could not support the defense's efforts, the defense carrying the team, but to no avail due to the fact that the entire operation just wasn't running soundly and smoothly and efficiently. Game management mistakes, like just a season that really set the Giants and everybody associated with them back in a huge way. Personalities clashing along with that as the good football wasn't happening and the cream wasn't rising to the top as they were trying to find solutions to fix it. And in the end, then the Wilkins firings ends up being kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. So, Mike, that's your answer. The Intel doesn't like Daniel Jones. Tony says, Pat, no clue if you discussed this. Would you want someone proven in the league like Bill or Antonio Pierce or bring in new talent from the NCAA or such? I think you need somebody proven because next year there's a lot of pressure on this team to win for Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, but I think that's going to be a tough thing to get because of the situation they're in and what the roster looks like and is going to look like. Pierce does feel like something that the Giants would absolutely try to kick the tires on based on their track record, his connection to them, and the way that it would probably get the fan base going. That definitely feels like a Giants thing to do. I do think Pierce did a good job with the Raiders for the time he was there. Hunter says, I'd have a lot more respect for Daboll if he kept it real with us. Don't fill us with BS. I think it shows toxicity if a guy hurt us. Tell us is hurt. Tell us. Yeah, I agree. By the way, if you remember, Brian Daboll, and Joe Shane coming in when they were first here, announcing that Pat Graham was going to be back, the defensive coordinator under Joe Judge, that he was going to be back, if you remember correctly, that he was coming back and he was going to be their defensive coordinator. And then Pat Graham saying, no thanks, see ya, and going to the Raiders, right? So a little bit of a repeat maybe of the Giants playing the game of putting the onus on that person and even trying to force their hand into something, but then that person deciding that New York Giants was not the best organization for them. Let's see. Justin Lee says Wink wasn't all that awesome and maybe not worth the headache. Justin, if you look at this team and you think the defense was the problem, I don't know what to tell you. Joe says, Pat, you're the man. We appreciate your honesty. Joe, I appreciate you. Joey B says, makes Pat's job hard when the team sucks early, no doubt. Then you got to write about the negativity and find other things to fill gaps because the team sucks. It does stink. Hunter says, Pat, you got to try to get the Scottish Hammer on the pod. Have a really good story coming on the Scottish Hammer. Stay tuned. That's a good idea. Scott says, thank you, Pat. Sorry, I was commenting like crazy. I just didn't see a bright future. No. I loved all the comments, Scott. Thank you. Truly believe it's going to be a long time until we get a good team. Thank you, Pat. Keep it up, bro. Thank you, Scott. No, I really do appreciate it. And down the stretch, let's see. Will the Giants draft a QB, says Joe. I think it's a possibility, Joe. I do. Phil says, will McKinney be tagged or will the Giants let him walk like Jordan Love? Are the Giants a cheap organization? They just don't want to pay. There are times where the Giants try to save money here or there. They're not, cheap the way that the Chargers are known to be cheap, or that the Bengals at times have a reputation for being cheap, but definitely not the big spenders or the billionaires, right? 100% billionaires that some of these other organizations are, some of these new owners are. You meant like Julian Love, right? I was a little confused by that. I definitely think that McKinney is a candidate to be brought back, but you're going to have to pay. He certainly played well enough to earn the Giants' desire to entertain bringing him back. If I had to guess, I would say he ends up playing elsewhere, but you can't just lose all your good players either. So that could be a situation where they resign McKinney. But also, if you're McKinney, you got to have questions about where's this going, right? And as a free agent or as a pending free agent, he's going to have that choice. The franchise tag is expensive for safeties. So I guess a franchise tag possibly may be more likely for Saquon Barkley again, although Barkley clearly does not want to be tagged and looks like he wants, some freedom there to go test the waters. Let's see. Free agents for O-line, not another draftee. Okay, says Joey B. Gotcha. Few bright sides of this year. This chat, great place to vent about the Giants. Thanks again, Pat. You got it, Hunter. And thanks again, Pat. Ocean City, check it out. You almost drowned in Ocean City, Maryland a few times. Oh, great memories. Yeah, Ocean City, New Jersey for me, but been golfing down in Ocean City, Maryland, OCMD, that's for sure. Joey B says he doesn't think the Giants would draft a black QB. I think they'd go May or even McCarthy, but I'd love to see them take Daniels if they did. I would like to think that the Giants would draft a black quarterback and just base it on the evaluation and the assessment and not on the color of the player's skin. I do understand the history you're alluding to, Joe. I don't think it's unfair to discuss that, and it's not taboo to discuss that here based on the Giants' history. I mean, Tyrod Taylor this season became the first black starting quarterback to win a game ever for the Giants franchise, right? But I do think the Giants would draft a black quarterback if their evaluation took them there. And Hunter says, I'll be mad if we tag Barkley and don't trade him. And Molly Mall says, do you think drafting a quarterback buys Daboll and Shane more time? Only if he looks excellent. Guys, this has been a 1 hour, 40-minute Dynamo live chat following the breaking news I had today on Wink Martindale resigning as defensive coordinator of the New York Giants to pursue head coach and defensive coordinator opportunities. You guys made this possible. This has been awesome. Even though I was about 17 minutes late, I think it was, you hung in there, you stuck with me, and we got through it. Joey says that the Giants should have drafted who instead of DJ? Anyway, Scott says, good night, Pat. Thank you. Keep up the good work. You got it. Hunter wants another pod if Kafka gets fired. Listen, this is continuing to move. This is continuing to evolve. Like I said, right now, one of my major questions is, what are John Mara and Steve Tisch going to bed tonight on Black Monday, going into Tuesday morning, thinking about how their leadership handled this situation? Did they push the defensive coordinator out the door? Why are they losing the leader of their only promising side of the ball? Why are they losing 2 out of 3 coordinators? Why are the players not happy about that? What does this say about the direction of the franchise? Why did it get so bad so quickly? Chronicle says, appreciate you, Pat. Good night. and he thinks Kafka will be fired tomorrow. We will see. Where the hell is Tish? He needs to be more vocal. Joey, great question. Thank you, guys. Brought to you by Bet Online. See you next time. If you didn't hear the full thing, we can post this on the podcast feed. Give me those thumbs up. Give me those good likes. And Hunter, thanks for kicking us off and finishing us off. Thank you and have a great night.